Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. We've covered the case intermittently, the case against R.Kelly. You'll recall that when he was first arrested, his criminal defense attorney had a press conference. And in addition to, of course, denying the charges and telling us how R.Kelly is being unfairly treated and he would never do the things of which he's accused and so on and so forth, there was an exchange with Jim DeRogatis, who's been on the R.Kelly beat for some time, at that press conference. Here's how that went.
We have to look at what happened. I know on one of the cases, there are a number of interviews where the young lady says, I lied about how old I was. I lied to him about how old I was. And then recently said, oh no, I lied about lying about how old he was. We'll have to look at it.
Showed him the ID, the fake ID, then showed him the real ID. Don't misquote a victim, Mr. Greenberg. Don't misquote a victim. That's not what she said. Well, she initially lied to him, then she showed him a state ID. She was here today. Did you see her in tears while the charges were read?
So you have a book coming out, and
yeah,
I hope you sell lots of books.
I don't give a about selling a single book. I've talked to that woman, and I've talked to 47
What else is
others.
your question?
I'm not Mr. Abnati, and I'm not you.
Okay, so let's try and keep it professional, and don't swear at me.
Cried in court a liar.
Well, just because they cried doesn't make them truthful. And so we're going to look at the evidence, okay? We'll look at the evidence, and we'll look at the evidence. Let's keep it. Let's watch the swearing, okay?
I did. I'm sorry, you're upset.
No, let's not. Let's not watch the swearing. I like a press conference like that when you're dealing with, a professional prevaricator like Mr. Greenberg representing Mr. Kelly. And the book that was referenced, well, it's out now. It's called Soulless, The Case Against R.Kelly, written by Jim DeRogatis, co-host of Sound Opinions, contributor for The New Yorker, and associate professor of instruction at Columbia College. He's an author. He's a drummer. He's a miniaturist. Well, we're going to find out what that is.
Well, hello. What exactly is that?
And he joins us now. Jim, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Sure. Well, that was not my proudest moment with Greenberg.
But
it was effective.
There is context. I had just been hugged by this young woman who Kelly picks up at the trial in 2008. When she is 15, they begin sexual contact when she is 16. She is one of the 4 victims in the current state of Illinois indictment. And this woman says, thank you. And it's like the courage that she had to speak out against this man who was the worst predator in the history of popular music, preying on the black communities of the South and West Side since 1991, the first documented underage sexual contact with a 15-year-old girl he picks up in her choir class. I was a little upset.
Yeah. And well, tell us how this all started because you worked at the Sun-Times, correct, and somebody sent you the tape? The infamous tape, or how did this go?
14 months after the first story. Okay. Someone sent a fax and said, you compared Robert to Marvin Gaye. Marvin had his problems, but they're nothing like Robert's. Robert's problem, this goes back many years, is young girls. And, this is something that had long been whispered in the music community, in the black communities of Chicago. R. Kelly likes them young. All right? And I began to look into it with Abden Palish at the Chicago Sun-Times. The first story was December 2000. It was already 9 years in the making. Victim number 1, 1991. He marries Aaliyah illegally when she is 15 in 1994. The first lawsuit is 1996. He settles it 1998. I felt like we were late on this story that everybody on the South and West sides knew and many were disgusted by. It sounds like exaggeration when I say if you talk to 2 out of 3 women in the black communities of Chicago, 2 out of 3 will have a story of him cruising Kenwood Academy or Whitney Young High School, the Evergreen Plaza shopping mall, the Rock and Roll McDonald's. It really is horrifying that this has happened in full view of the world. While he sold 100 million albums, earned $250 million, opens the Winter Olympics in Utah in 2002. It's extraordinary.
It is extraordinary, and actually, that's where I want to go because it's one of the obvious questions. You talk about him marrying Aaliyah when she is not of age, and it goes on for 2 decades, and so many people knew. And I'm not just talking about people in the neighborhoods, but people in law enforcement, people who are civilian political leaders. This was the ultimate charges were not a surprise. I mean, for goodness sakes, Dave Chappelle did a parody sketch about it. And so why did anybody take who was in a position to do so, take a legal interest in R. Kelly until the last year or so?
There really are 2 answers to that question. The first is he was a cash cow. Jive Records, one of the biggest record companies in the world, Britney Spears, NSYNC, the Backstreet Boys, and Kelly, earns $1 billion. Kelly merely earned $250 million. No one wanted to derail the money train. And number 2, nobody cared about young black girls. To be clear, I am only amplifying what so many young black women have told me since 2000. Nobody matters less in our society than young black girls. If it had been one white victim from Winnetka, this would have been a different story.
Mm. Yeah.
And how many more victims do you think are still out there? I mean, I watched the series.
I know the names of 48 women.
Oh, my gosh.
Whose lives he has seriously damaged or ruined because some of them attempted suicide after the sexual contact as a teenager ended. I don't think it's hyperbole to say that. I've seen the scars, mental and physical. It's so widespread. It's hard to wrap your mind around it. How did this happen? The churches failed. The courts failed. Law enforcement failed. Civil attorneys failed. Journalism failed in that no other newspapers, locally or nationally, picked it up. All the Sun-Times, we were left alone reporting this story for entirely too long. And when I say the churches failed, I mean the Reverend Jesse Jackson, on the day Kelly was indicted, with evidence of a 26-minute and 39-second video of him having sex with a 14-year-old, urinating in her mouth, said, I quote, "There are bigger problems in society than R. Kelly." And the Reverend James Meeks appeared on many television programs as his spiritual advisor. Operation Push, the Baptist power structure in Chicago, took money from Kelly. And he's later booked by the Black Congressional Caucus to do a fundraiser. And he's named the Grand Marshal of the Bud Billiken Parade to raise money for back-to-school supplies.
Right.
The community did not want to believe or stop this man.
Well, I just couldn't believe in 2002 at the Olympics. Because I was there, and he gave an interview to Marion Brooks, and then he went out and sang the opening ceremonies. I thought for sure they were going to yank him, and they didn't do it.
No, that's why it's unconscionable. The Sun-Times drops those stories. They get picked up by the Associated Press as the Chicago Sun-Times is reporting. Yeah. And what we were reporting was Kelly has abused his position of wealth and fame to pursue illegal sexual contact with underage girls. Nobody forwarded the reporting. And, it really is, people talk about how does the Catholic priest, get away with what he's doing. And he's in this position of trust, and nobody wants to believe the worst. And, additionally with Kelly, and I understand this, I'm a pop music critic. I'm the co-host of Sound Opinions, on public radio. This was your high school graduation song, I Believe I Can Fly, or the prom theme, Step in the Name of Love, played at your wedding. Ignition has played at every backyard barbecue you've ever gone to. This music becomes part of your life, and you are reluctant to believe the worst of the man who created it. It's a problem that's going on now with Michael Jackson, but Kelly, it's always been there from day one, early 90s, through, I admit, his non-confessional released last year. He's never made a secret of it. He marries Aaliyah at 15. He's having sexual contact with this young girl, and he titles her album "Age Ain't Nothing But a Number."
Yeah,
that's 94.
Yeah.
It's never been in the shadows.
Although with respect to Michael Jackson, a lot of scales falling from a lot of eyes after that Neverland documentary was released, and perhaps something along those lines needs to be done about R. Kelly. But it's interesting that you note about the unwillingness to believe the worst, even when it's in full display. And it reminds me of Ta-Nehisi Coates' piece back when he was at the Atlantic about Bill Cosby, when the allegations started coming out about Bill Cosby, and Ta-Nehisi Coates was sort of had a fit of self-reflection and said, you know what, I failed too in that instance, because I heard the stuff about Bill Cosby, but Bill Cosby was Mr. Huxtable to me. And so I didn't run the traps. I didn't do the due diligence I would normally do if it was a politician or somebody else of that sort about whom these allegations were being made. And it's sort of I mean, with the exception of you and Abden, perhaps, it sort of seems like the same thing was at play here with R. Kelly.
Yeah, for sure. And then there's this other dark flip side that really concerns me as someone who spent his life chronicling this art form. Is there something about transgression that attracts people to certain artists? What am I talking about? You know, there are Charles Manson songs streaming on Spotify. Mm-hmm. They are awful. You know, Manson could not start a musical career, so he went into the guru murderer business, which is horrifying. You know, why are those there? There's no reason to listen to them except if you're drawn to the evil that they represent. And I think, you know, the amount of social media hatred that the mute R. Kelly activists are getting, that the brave women who've spoken out are getting, that I'm getting, and I can take care of myself. I don't care. I feel for those women. It is now no longer a question of, do we believe this? Is this a slur against a black superstar? Is it a racist attack? Which I never understood, because the victims are almost all black, and there's one brave Puerto Rican girl. You know, it is now, we know and we don't care. And to me, that's like looking at the hatred in the face of those absurd white boys marching with Home Depot tiki torches, hating black people and gay people and Jewish people marching in Charlottesville. It's a raw, evil hatred, you know, that, you know, you hate to think is connected to the power of this art form that I believe can ultimately uplift us, you know.
So, yeah. Well, he has an upcoming trial. Do you think this time he's going to get nailed? I mean, that this time he'll actually spend time in prison and never see the light of day?
The Illinois indictments only scratched the surface. The grand jury is sitting on the federal investigation by the FBI, the IRS, and the Department of Homeland Security. The federal indictments are coming within weeks. Those encompass 30 years of sex trafficking, obstruction of justice, tax evasion, and violations of the Mann Act that brought Chuck Berry down, transporting teenagers for sex across state lines. I think that that's going to be a case that actually shows the scope, which is what I tried to do in my book. Here are 30 years of this man and every system in Chicago failing to protect these young black girls.
Do you believe, you know, he's sort of crying poor in court. Do you believe that he has frittered away $100 million, $200 million?
No. I believe he is legitimately, when he sings "I am a broke blank legend," he is, because, you know, I mean, it took 6.5 years to go to trial in 2002. He's not acquitted till 2008. There was the top legal defense team in Chicago, $650 an hour, 4 attorneys. There are numerous settlements to underage girls, and you know, he has spent that $250 million keeping himself Teflon, and now I think that the justice is only beginning to come because he's broke. If he was as wealthy as he was in 2008, I don't think we'd see him getting this kind of scrutiny, which is also just, I mean, you know, that's just a horrifying thought. Really, it all comes down to money.
Yeah. And then what about, remember he said he had concerts in Dubai, and then they proved that there was nothing lined up?
You have to realize Kelly is a serial liar. Okay. One of the things that people have been tweeting about that they picked up in my book, you know, he settles the first lawsuit by an underage girl. She was 15. It began in 1991. That lawsuit settled in 1998. He pays her $250,000. Then he sues his homeowner's insurance company to get them to pay. They refused. They said, "What, are you kidding? This is a settlement for underage sex." And he appeals. And the appellate court says, "What, are you crazy?" I mean, Think about that kind of hubris and also stupidity. You know what I mean? It's like the tree falls on your house, you get the homeowner's claim, but you're having sex with 15-year-olds and you want your insurance company to pay for it?
Yeah,
I mean, this is documented. So people are saying, well, liar, hater, all this stuff. I mean, in 19 years of reporting on Kelly and his behavior, there has not been a single correction, clarification, retraction, much less a lawsuit. So when Mr. Greenberg stands at the podium, one of his defense lawyers, and says, all of these women are lying, well, no. No, first of all, it's impossible for 48 women to all tell the same lie. And this is what people said about Cosby. It was only when those 24 women brave enough to put their faces on the cover of New York Magazine, and you look at that and you say, my God, I know these people. They can't all be lying. But the difference here is race. Many of Cosby's victims were white, the majority. And Kelly has always preyed on the most vulnerable in society. Young black girls, no one was willing to believe.
Yeah, I mean, Kelly clearly is pathological. I'm no psychiatrist, but you see that playing out as he's starting to crack up with interviews like he did with Gayle King. I don't think that affords him well if he thinks he's going to, get out of this by winning over public opinion.
Well, he thought that was a good performance, I guess, from inside his camp.
Well,
he wanted to show the passion, the hurt, of being wrongly accused, crucified, like they crucified our Lord.
Uh-huh.
He accomplished what he wanted to accomplish. But I think people are beginning to see, just how insane this story really is. He got out of jail. After he was indicted, spent 3 nights in jail before he was able to raise the bail money, and he went to the Rock and Roll McDonald's on Clark Street.
Yeah, and then to Biggs.
And this is where, but at the Rock and Roll McDonald's in 1998, he picked up a 16-year-old after her high school prom.
Hey.
He returns to the scene of his crimes, and he consistently, cruised Kenwood Academy. He did 1 year there before he was expelled for not being able to read or write. And, it's pathological. He's been returning to the same places in Chicago since 1991. And it's just horrifying. But, we also have the serial killer that is only beginning to come to light, of dozens of young black girls, right? I mean, what is it about the South and West Sides that they are not equal to the rest of this city that I love but also hate?
It's a topic we cover routinely every Memorial Day weekend and, frankly, every weekend in the summer in Chicago. I hear you. He is Jim DeRogatis, co-host of Sound Opinions. He's a contributor to The New Yorker. He's an associate professor of instruction at Columbia College. And the book on R.Kelly, 2 decades worth of following R.Kelly in this case, which, as you just heard, is coming to trial both at the local level as well as probably the federal level. The book is Soulless, The Case Against R.Kelly. Jim, thanks for joining us, and good luck with the book.
Well, thank you, and I'll be at the Chicago Humanities Fest on Thursday with the Mute R.Kelly.
Oh, okay,
it took two women from Atlanta.
Oh, yeah,
to begin the process of stopping him.
I'm sorry about that. Thursday, June 13th, 6 p.m., Chicago Humanities Fest at the Chop Shop, 2033 West North Avenue. Conversation with Kenyette Tisha Barnes, and it's
Nike Odelay,
Mute Kelly, and then journalist Kyra. I know Kyra Kyles from way back in the day, and journalist Kyra Kyles.
She's great.
Tickets can be found where for the event?
Just check out Chicago Humanities Fest.
Okay.
But thank you. Thank you for your attention to the story. It's just freaking sad.
Thanks for your work, Jim.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
You're killing me, man! Connect with Dan and Amy on the AM 560 The Answer mobile app. Just text the word app to 64636 to download the app today.